Hello, and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News Channel. Today we're going to talk about will Bitcoin reign supreme forever? And I kind of take the middle ground on this because Bitcoin, I think, will reign for quite a while. I do not think anything within the next 3 years, possibly longer, is going to take over Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the index coin for the market, and I think it will continue to be. One of the reasons I say this is because utilization for any coin to actually match price is not coming anytime soon. We are still several years away from that, despite all the world domination things from the various fan clubs of coins they have. IOTA and VeChain, they're still quite a ways away from actually the number of their transactions overtaking their speculative coin price. XRP is still years away from their speculative price overtaking their real price. We actually see the growth patterns for some of these coins, and it's really not all that big. And either it's because of like regulations or hesitancy with the industry or some technology like IoT that actually still needs to develop, we're still many years away from doing that. And as long as the regulations, the technology, the willingness to adopt is not there, I don't think anything will overtake Bitcoin. And you have to look at the reality of it right now of which coin is actually being utilized the most. People keep on saying that Bitcoin does not have a use case, but that's entirely wrong. I mean, there is theoretical use case, which I don't really care all that much about at this point, and there's actual utilization. Utilization-wise, what's actually being used right now, Bitcoin dwarfs every other coin. They have over $100 million a day in transactional value. You have BitPay alone. You have people in Cuba buying internationally from Bitcoin. You have Venezuela, like the Venezuelan oil company, owning Bitcoin and Ethereum. So, and there's a lot more. There are a lot more examples of that. Whenever there's a third world country in turmoil, and they're looking at a coin, it's pretty much always Bitcoin. I know Dash can make as much noise as they want about how they're dominant in Venezuela, but if you just go outside like the Dash marketing scheme, you can see it's Bitcoin. So not only is Bitcoin's utilization far above anything else, it has the first mover advantage, and it's going to be very, very hard to decouple from Bitcoin. But even if VeChain gets that, magical 30 million burn a day within the next 6 months or 8 months or whatever that I've been talking about, I still think that would only push up the price some, and it would not overtake Bitcoin because there's such a big gap between Bitcoin and everything else. So for the utilization to push the price up that much where it overtakes Bitcoin, I don't think any coin is actually close. Now, the good news is Bitcoin's so far ahead of like most other coins that I talk about, like IOTA or VeChain or anything. You have room to grow like 30, 40x, if not more, before you hit that Bitcoin roof. But I do not think that any coin is really going to grow to overtake Bitcoin within the next 3 years. I think if any coin does within this short time period, it's going to be Ethereum, and it's going to be after their proof of stake. I think Ethereum by far has the most potential to jump Bitcoin within the next 3 years. After 3 years, 3 or 5 years, once the industry actually gets used to blockchain and all these use cases come online, whether it's financials, logistics, and stuff like that, I think there is a possibility of other coins taking Bitcoin. And I do not think Bitcoin will actually keep its crown forever. It just doesn't really seem likely because Bitcoin's based on new technology. And because of the kind of like the rules of like upgrading, converting Bitcoin to proof of stake or proof of authority or whatever, I just don't think that's going to happen. And eventually its transactions per second will clog it down. Now, Bitcoin itself can do about 7 transactions per second optimally. Using SegWit, I think they can get that up to maybe 14 to 20 transactions per second. Now, that is obviously not enough to process all the world's transactions. And yes, I am fully aware of solutions like Lightning, but those really aren't solutions that honestly can work full way. Yes, it can solve a lot of the problem, but Lightning or using XRP Ledger to transfer Bitcoin aren't true solutions because they aren't on-chain solutions. They're off-chain solutions. And if you actually want to cash the Bitcoin out, not cash the Bitcoin out, but if you want to actually claim the Bitcoin after those transactions, you still have to go through the on-chain reconciliation process. So a third-party extension like Lightning or XRP Ledger isn't going to solve Bitcoin's problem. You still have the same transactional value, or not the same transactional fees and delay in time, even if you use those third-party solutions, because they're not on-chain solutions. And if you want to actually claim your Bitcoin and reconcile it on chain, you still have the same Bitcoin fees and the Bitcoin process. Now, I will have to say the number of unconfirmed transactions on Bitcoin has gone way down since the last bull run. And the volume of Bitcoin right now being used is actually more than the last bull run. So SegWit has relieved it somewhat, and some people are starting to adopt Lightning, and that will relieve the congestion. But at some point, when you hit a certain point, the amount of reconciliation on-chain transactions is going to overtake the ability for Bitcoin to manage those transactions, especially if you want it to become some kind of world currency. Now, if you just want it to become some kind of like store of value for the world, like gold, I really don't think you really need to improve it that much, because gold really changing. I mean, people trade gold futures all the time, but physical gold actually changing hands, it doesn't happen all that often. And I think that could be the same for Bitcoin. But there are going to be other use cases, whether in finance, logistics, IoT, or artificial intelligence, that are going to require a lot of transactions, on-chain transactions, and Bitcoin will not be able to do that. So in those giant industries, other coins are going to shape up. And that's why Bitcoin is not the end-all be-all with cryptocurrency. Now, there is the danger that with all those other use cases that people will actually just use the blockchain technology and not the coin. And we see that all the time. So if that actually happens, then Bitcoin might actually achieve its dominance forever. If people never catch on to decentralized apps or anything like that, if they only want a decentralized kind of like peer-to-peer store of value, then Bitcoin might be it. But even as a peer-to-peer currency, it doesn't really work that well because of its limitations in transactions. Now, I think what would actually work best as kind of like a world currency for an exchange is something like Bitcoin, but built on a Generation 3 blockchain. The currency would actually, I would think, have to be slightly inflationary for this to work. And that's mainly because unlike real currencies where you can just print more if you lose or destroy bills, you can't do that in cryptocurrency. So, and we know there's a certain amount of cryptocurrencies being lost each year, and I think there will always be because people are careless. And there's really no way to reclaim it once you lose your private key or something. So to offset that, the amount lost each year, you have to have a slow inflation rate, either 1 or 2%, to basically counteract that so you have a stable money supply. You don't want a money supply in an expanding economy, in an expanding population, in an expanding world that slowly just burns itself out. You don't want hyperinflation, but you want at least a stable money supply. And that ensures that each dollar basically will be worth the same throughout time, instead of slightly getting less and less because of the scarcity. There will have to be some mechanism to determine like where how many bills are actually lost, how much currency is actually lost, and determine like a replacement value for the new kind of currency that's actually printed to replace those lost. Remember, what I'm saying is you're not printing more currency. You're basically just printing currency to make up for those that are lost. And I think that's actually necessary for a long-run world currency. None of the currencies really fit that right now. You could say Stellar, but Stellar's got a couple of problems on its own. And there are third-generation networks that can actually do that. So if you actually want a decentralized peer-to-peer currency to use as a world currency, then you need to look at newer currencies that actually slowly, maybe like 1% increase over time to counteract the deflation that would actually happen by people actually losing the coins. So Bitcoin does have a chance to be the king forever if people are just interested in the blockchain technology and not actually interested in the currencies themselves, which is a possibility because we're seeing that a lot actually right now. People just adopting the blockchain technology but not the coins. But I actually don't think that will always be the case. I think there will be a use for cryptocurrencies in certain fields, and I do think some coin eventually in the future is going to replace Bitcoin, because Bitcoin can be the store of value, but if you want like a coin for transactions, it needs to be able to process a lot more transactions per minute. And some of these industries like I'm talking about, like finance, IoT, smart cities, logistics, they're going to be very huge. And those coins eventually in time, I think will actually take one of those coins will take Bitcoin's crown, and the entire market will not be tethered to Bitcoin anymore at that time. I think it's going to take at least 3 years, if not longer, for that to happen. The evolution of this stuff happens slowly, and people need to become more accepting of it. I think regulations by itself will take at least 3 years to get everything hammered out. You might think like there's going to be one giant slate of legislation that takes care of all this. within like a year or two, I really don't think that's going to happen. This is going to happen bit by bit, and it's going to take general and societal acceptance for this to actually happen. There's no way they're going to declare something the world currency that very few people actually have right now. That's really not going to happen. For the currency stuff, I think like generally the IMF's going to make like an IMF coin or something after all the banks make their CBDCs, and that's basically what's going to happen there. But for transferring money, for doing logistics, for doing IoT, for doing AI, there's going to be a couple of coins in each industry that actually spring up. Now, I don't think any coin is going to dominate one industry specifically, and this is what's going to make it really hard for things to actually overtake Bitcoin, because you're thinking of like one coin that's going to dominate like a huge area like finance or IoT or logistics. I don't think that's the case. I think in many of those companies, like the company itself will actually make an internal coin themselves, like JPM coin, like what Ralph Lauren is actually doing. They're making an internal coin for themselves there, and they're going to use that coin within their own industry. And you might snicker at that and say, oh, it's only one company. But the thing is, like these big companies, they actually own sizable chunks of the entire industry. And when they actually make their own coin, they no longer need your coin within that industry. And that could be billions or trillions of dollars by itself, depending on what that company is and how they actually act. And companies can make enclaves where they just basically use like an internal coin, inside themselves, and that eats away part of the market. Plus, just because Ford made the first Model T, it doesn't mean they completely dominate the car market. It's not like Ford's the only car company out there. There's Chevy, there's Chrysler, there's Toyota, there's Honda, there's all these other industries. And especially in the wired world, once they see a company taking over a certain market, other competitors are going to jump in, some that are currently involved in the industry and others that are new going to come in. So a lot of the industries are going to be split several ways. There's not going to be I don't think there's going to be a standard in the giant industries. I think it's going to be very competitive. There's going to be several networks like, IOTA versus VeChain versus Walton Chain. I don't really know about Walton Chain, but let's just say IOTA versus VeChain. And you're going to have like, XRP versus RippleNet versus JPM IIN network, both which have like 200, 300 subscribers under their network, versus whatever the hell Swift comes up with and other software networks come up with. So that's what's going to make it really hard for these coins to actually overcome Bitcoin in terms of market cap and value. So right now, I do think for the next few years, Bitcoin is a pretty safe investment. It is probably the safest investment in cryptocurrency, because people tend to mention it more than all the other coins. And whenever you see a country come into turmoil, they always turn to Bitcoin. They're not turning to Ethereum. They're not turning to XRP. They're not turning to Litecoin. And they're not turning to any other coin. They are turning to Bitcoin. And that kind of mentality is going to be hard to shift away from. The people make up all these theories about how it can suddenly flip overnight. That's not really something. I don't think it can happen like just overnight. I don't think that's really possible. I don't think there's any like predetermined plan by some kind of like crazy world elite plan to make X currency the world currency. I don't think it's with Bitcoin. I don't think it's with Ethereum. I don't think it's with XRP. I think those kind of conspiracy theories belong in the trash bin, especially if you're serious about investing in this sector, because you're trying to make real money, and hoping on ponies and fairy princesses and unicorns, that's really not going to make you make the best decisions. Look at reality. And you have to see that Bitcoin is going to grow in the coming years, and it's probably going to be the biggest coin for a while. Will it have the best ROI? No, it won't have the best ROI. Some of the smaller coins will have much better ROI, but you're kind of picking and choosing. You're basically really trading reward for risk. I would actually definitely do some of that with part of my crypto holdings, but I would still keep some in Bitcoin, because I do think Bitcoin will rise as well. And it's much safer than pretty much all the other coins, because it's generally the first one to get adoption anywhere when they talk about cryptocurrencies, regardless if it's like credit cards, wallets, fees and stuff. And that has a lot of staying power. So that's my view. I think Bitcoin will retain its crown for the next 3 to 5 years, but I do think eventually one of the coins will actually flip Bitcoin. And it is definitely not the only coin that actually has any kind of use case, because there's going to be many coins that have use cases. So that is my view on Bitcoin. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you. Have a nice day, and like and subscribe, people.